When looking at any mediums from books to movies to even video games, we can find what could be referred to as cult classics all over the place. A piece of work that has garnered a small but super loyal fan base. In movies, I look at something like UHF or Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or Super Troopers, for example. Today we're going to be looking at a cult classic video game, Alan Wake, developed by Remedy Entertainment. Having made their name for Max Payne 1 and 2, the studio took about 5 years after making Max Payne 2 to work on Alan Wake, finally releasing in Q1 of 2010, selling approximately 4.5 million copies. I think that this would basically fall into that cult classic definition, seeing as that 4.5 million has sold in 12 years, including a remake. After a ton of outpouring fan theories and demands from people who love the original, 12 years later, we finally got the announcement of Alan Wake 2, after many teases and hints, including in other Remedy games, like Control, for example, who had old DLC devoted to Alan Wake and kind of going into what happens in this game from the Control perspective, which we're also going to do a video on in the future as well. For years, fans of the original have been calling for a sequel, but why is that? In this video, I want to explore what made Alan Wake such a cult classic, from its narrative to its systems and gameplay. Let's leave no shadow unlit and dive into why Alan Wake is actually a pretty damn good video game and definitely worth your time. As always, if you enjoyed this video or any of the content on the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as liking and sharing the video. It all helps with getting this video into the vaunted YouTube algorithm and lets others be able to find this one as well. Please let me know what your thoughts are on Alan Wake in the comments down below, or, just about the video quality as a whole, which, is probably going to be trash, but I'm going to try and make it as good as possible for you. Now, without further ado, and the shameless shilling, let's kick on your lanterns, dispel some of that darkness, and let's dive into the lake that is known as Alan Wake. When it comes to discussing the narrative of Alan Wake, the story really just feels like you're playing a video game version of a Stephen King novel, albeit with a bit more convoluted peaks and valleys along the way. This is a pretty well-fitting tone, as in Alan Wake you play as, you guessed it, Alan Wake, a writer of horror and thriller novels who is currently suffering from writer's block and lack of inspiration after his last book, which was just a massive success. Your wife, Alice, in order to try and alleviate this writer's block conundrum of not being able to put anything down on paper, takes Alan on a vacation to get away from the big city and bustling life of book tours and book signings to the Pacific Northwest in a town known as Bright Falls. After getting off of the ferry, Wake goes into the local diner to get a key to the cabin they'll be staying at on Cauldron Lake. This is the point where things begin to get odd. After speaking to the waitress, who is a massive fan of Alan Wake and his writing, you spot a couple of crazy old rockers wanting to listen to their coconut songs to the sheriff sitting enjoying a cup of coffee in this quaint town. As you move to the back, where you're told that Stucky's awaiting you to give you the key to the cabin that you're going to, this old lady's seems really odd staring into the back dark corridor leading to the bathrooms. Tells you basically to be careful and stay out of the dark as much as you possibly can. Alan Wake, naturally thinking she's crazy, heads back into the darkness in order to go and grab the key from Stucky, and is met with a woman in black who hands him the key to Cauldron Lake and says she'll be by to check on him in a little bit. Her tone is ominous, and there's a slight tinge of something sinister behind it, which you can't really place at the time. You head back out of the dark alley to your wife in the car waiting for you to basically get in the car so you guys can go to the cabin and head off into the sunset. As you drive away, a man known as Stucky comes running out of the diner yelling for Mr. Wake to come back as he has the keys for the cabin that they rented. So whose keys did he get? Upon reaching your final destination, you're met with a beautiful rustic cabin sitting on a bird hand looking island in the middle of the lake. It's quaint, quiet, and strangely foreboding all at the same time. After walking around and exploring the land with your wife, Alan Wake goes inside to find Alice, telling you to go into the study for a surprise. In there, much to the chagrin of Alan, there's a typewriter waiting for him. Alice tells Wake that she thinks that this would be a great time to get away and try to get back into writing, and that also in town there's a doctor that is, basically certified to help creatives find their creative juices back and get those things flowing again, get out of the writer's block scenario. Wake gets frustrated and naturally pretty pissed and storms off into the night, knowing that Alice would be unable to follow him due to her debilitating fear of being in the dark. It's kind of a fucked up thing because if I got into an argument with my wife, my first reaction would be to go and do the thing that she's absolutely afraid of. But each their own. I'm not married to Alice. So after he blows off some steam, Alan all of a sudden hears a shriek from the cabin and all the lights suddenly go out as well. Running back inside, he finds his wife having been thrown into the lake and being pulled down by something. You can't really tell what, as it's kind of shrouded in waves and in darkness, to say the least. Like any good husband, Wade dives in afterwards, and promptly you are waking up in the middle of a car accident on the side of the mountain. The setup for Alan Wake is really something out of a Stephen King novel. I've said this once, but it bears repeating once again. You're an unsuspecting couple going to a strange remote area. Insidious things ensue. Everybody's kind of backwater. This takes place in the Pacific Northwest, whereas Stephen King really writes out of Maine, but the kind of the same sentiment is still there. It's a fish out of water scenario of a time that's still current day, but kind of exists in a weird rustic past life where, you know, everything's just a little bit not normal. This writing really works for horror as well, because I mean, think about horror nowadays. It's hard to really do anything truly scary, as you can always just reach in your pocket for your iPhone and call the fucking cops. So having a setting out like this actually in horror really works for me, because it kind of gives credence as to why somebody's not calling for help in one way or another. So random aside, but there you go. The setup itself with the writing is truly incredible as well, as it kind of sets up and feeds a little bit of information to keep the player intrigued, but doesn't just spoil the whole blah, this is what we're going to be looking for and this is what we're going to be doing, and like most games tend to do now. It kind of keeps breadcrumbing you along in order to find out what's next and what's going to happen next. And it's honestly, it's truly well written, which is where Alan Wake for me vastly shines. In this video, unlike the Dead Rising ones that we just kind of got through, I don't really want to break the story down step by step. I feel like that, you know, this is a game that's really worth playing for its narrative alone, and for me to come onto this video that we're just going to be kind of critiquing and analyzing and looking at other parts of this game, I would feel weird if we just kind of dropped the entire narrative on you at one point. I'm thinking about doing a series where we literally just do narrative reviews as well, so if that'd be interesting to you, you know, leave a comment down below. Anyway, let's get back to Alan Wake. From here, Wake navigates Bright Falls in search of what happened to Alice. Upon his awakening, he discovers that somehow he lost a week of his life, and all while braving the forces of literal darkness, who can seemingly take over anybody that gets close to Alan or his friends, bringing out their quote-unquote dark side to stop Alan from discovering what happened to him and Alice. On Wake's journey, he also finds manuscript pages from a novel he wrote but doesn't remember writing. This is an awesome storytelling device that Remedy used here, as not only does it give some insight to what the other characters and side characters of the story are thinking and their motives, but if you read enough of them, you actually begin to see these pages reflect what's going on in the game at that moment, or even a little before where you're at and what you're actually about to play, revealing what's about to happen soon before it actually happens. These are naturally optional collectibles, and they're much akin to me as the BioShock audio logs, where it further fleshes out the world that you're in and adds a ton of story if you choose to hunt them down, which I highly recommend you do if you decide to play this. Upon reaching the second chapter, you meet your essential sidekick, Barry, who's your book manager, and I have to say, Barry as a character is fucking amazing. He brings that dichotomy to Alan that's really needed for a character who's so morose and dour as Alan Wake is. Barry is the lovable, bright red jacket wearing, loud, bombastic guy who just kind of bullies his way through and tries to use his words and his talking and his rhetoric in order to get what he wants. Whereas Alan more talks with his actions and is more brooding and moody. Barry is the complete dichotomy of that. And whenever Barry's in a scene, it's absolutely going to be awesome. And he truly cares for Alan. You can see it in his actions and the way that he comes out to help him at any point in turn. Even when Alan leaves him behind in order to try to keep Barry safe, Barry's still falling behind to try to find a way in order to help his friend figure out what the fuck is going on in Bright Falls. I think Barry is honestly an awesomely written character, and while some of his dialogue is a little cringy at times, for the character itself, it truly fucking works, which is a rare thing to have a character just deliver such cheesy, nonsensical lines, but yet be totally fitting with the character that you're playing. Barry is the shining spot in Alan Wake for me, and fuck, you better be in Alan Wake 2 or I'm going to be really upset about it. As you move through Bright Falls, banishing darkness with your trusty flashlight and arsenal of weapons and flares, Wake discovers that this isn't the first time events like this have played out in Bright Falls. You learn that Thomas Zane, a poet who came to Bright Falls and was consumed by the darkness, only surviving by writing a page, keeping his presence around to help whoever would be trying to fight in the darkness next. If I'm being honest, I really didn't like the Thomas Zane bits all that much. It really just felt like a vehicle for Remedy to basically kind of have your character that will like help you out along the way and give you the tutorials, this omniscient light presence that is there to help guide Alan and lead him to, figure out what the fuck happened to him and Alice and what the hell is the darkness. But I mean, at one point he shows up in a diver suit with like a bunch of lights in like the glass part where you look out of, and the other time he's like this omniscient ball that's like playing the role of God or something like that. I don't know. The whole thing is just bizarre to me. I like the idea of like this lake consuming creatives in order to basically feed itself and give itself power. However, the use of Thomas Zane and actually like showing him like really just fucking kind of felt dumb. I'm glad this wasn't like the biggest part of the game. You see this like at the very beginning and then a couple times in the middle and then like at the very end for about 20 seconds. But all in all, like this part kind of was a miss for me and it just felt kind of dumb if I'm being honest. By the end, you do discover that the darkness uses creatives to give it life and be able to grow and get its own power. It's alluded to always being there, ready to manifest itself and be given the power it craves through some sort of like, whether it be music or writing or storytelling or poetry. But to do so, it needs to be written or performed in the cabin on the lake where it lives. It is embodied in the old woman in black, who's just downright fucking creepy, and I feel I need to give a tip to the cap to the voice actress used for this role. She is literally downright fucking creepy and ominous, and it totally works when she's speaking to Wake in the diner or at the cabin when she takes Alice, or in taunting you towards the end of the game as you're making your way towards that final thing. The journey taken in Alan Wake is captivating and well worth the experience. Like I said, I don't want to spoil all the beat by beat moments into it because it really takes away from the game itself, which is so focused on its narrative. So while it's not necessarily a horror game, it is more of like a thriller mystery. It plays like a mystery thriller novel and weaves an awesome tale of intrigue that has truly gone underrated, in my opinion. Before we move on to the gameplay side of Alan Wake, I really need to take a step back and talk about the world of Bright Falls as a whole. As you explore the vast landscape of the Pacific Northwest, Bright Falls itself becomes more of a character as well, and it's really an awesome place to explore. Each chapter looks at a different area in the town and the surrounding landscapes, from the backwoods behind the gas station to the hiking trails to the radio tower to the town itself. It's a sleepy little mountain town, and while the town itself really gives off the vibe of that, small little main street tucked in the back of the woods, everything's kind of run down. There's like a store and a restaurant and like a cop station, a fire department, and everybody's like volunteering for it. Those towns that you're driving to go the back way because you don't want to take the interstate and you're just going through these podunk ass areas is exactly what it feels like. And the feeling of that is completely fucking nailed in this game. And the vistas and the landscapes are absolutely breathtaking, especially for a game being released in 2010. Being so remote also gives Bright Falls this like town out of time kind of feel where everything seems a little antiquated and really old, from using like this old radio technology as one of the collectibles to old ass TVs with the antennas on it when you're looking at your Nightfalls TV show collectibles, to just everything. I don't know. It just all feels so rustic and so quaint, and it completely works for this overarching mystery that occurs in Alan Wake. The setting of Bright Falls is truly probably one of my favorite gaming landscapes to explore. At the beginning and end of each chapter too, as it weaves in between the mountains and you start looking at all this luscious greenery in the middle of nowhere, it's absolutely breathtaking. What adds to the immersion of Bright Falls as well is the fact that there's no objective markers in Alan Wake forcing you to pay attention to to look at where you're going. Rather, you have to look at the signs in the world that actually lead you to where you need to go. The local populace are a quiet bunch and just want to be left alone to drink their coffee and exist in peace. Everyone knows everyone and they're protective of each other as well. For example, when you're dealing with Rose in her trailer after she's been consumed by the darkness, you walk with the manager of the trailer park over to her thing, and she's telling you, "Oh man, I've known Rose forever since she was a kid." As you are currently drugged and passed out in her trailer, however, the owner tends to call, in defense of Rose in order to protect her, calls the cops thinking that you're doing something bad. As you run, he goes, "Haha, fucking told you so. Nobody's gonna hurt my Rose," showing the actual true caringness that he has for this woman who he's known forever at this point. While it does lead to a cop chase running down, which is pretty cool as well. It just further develops that characterization of the town as a whole and the characters that do exist in it. Like, they truly are people that exist in it. I can't speak highly enough about Bright Falls as a video game play space. It truly is awesome. It makes me want to go to the Pacific Northwest and go and explore and see if it really looks like that. I'll make it out there one day, but it reminds me of just this. I live in Georgia, so it really reminds me of something like, those small towns that you see going up to LJ, and it's just, I don't know, man. There's something just so beautiful about it. Bright Falls is definitely worth the exploration and looking at every nook and cranny, reading all the signs and the history. It's truly a fleshed out thing to the point where it becomes a character. I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Bright Falls for a minute. So let's move on to the gameplay, but thank you for my side tangent. In looking at the moment-to-moment gameplay of Alan Wake, there are a few shining spots and cool ideas in the game, but it boils down to a lot of just walking, jumping, and shooting with some slight puzzle work. Alan Wake is a game about light and dark, something Remedy did not really hide the ball on too well. I mean, you're in the town of Bright Falls, and the TV show is called Night Springs. I mean, come on. Anyway, light plays a main mechanic for this game in its entirety, really. Every enemy you come across is consumed with darkness. With that, Wake must shine a flashlight onto the bad guys, draining their bar down until the darkness pops and you can finally shoot and kill them. This is the one and only combat mechanic in Alan Wake, with the only real change up being that the guns you use and the flashlights you find. This does add another resource that you need to be paying attention to besides actual ammunition, however, that being batteries for your flashlight. While this loop feels okay for the first few missions, it does end up feeling a little bit repetitive after a while, where by the end I was just dropping flares at choke points just so I could run through the area a little bit faster and not even engage with the killing of the guys. It's definitely not the most engaging combat in the world, but it's serviceable and it does the job. You do have this cool flare gun mechanic that acts a lot like a grenade when exploding, able to knock or completely kill one of the enemies in one bang, and that feels pretty good to land, but I mean, that's the one thing that maybe would stand out to me in the entire combat as a whole. Movement itself feels pretty clunky too, and I have to say that the camera angle is just kind of odd, kind of hovering around Alan Wake's crotch area, but also angled upwards, so it makes it really awkward to shoot and move. My word of advice is just to kind of use the flashlight as where your reticle would be if you were aiming and shooting. It tends to be pretty on target, and the aim assist is pretty generous as well. It's not the biggest issue in the world, but it does take some getting used to, so I just want to make people aware of that. It threw me off for probably the first chapter. Where the mechanics of light really do shine, in my opinion, is the inherent creation of checkpoints using light. Streetlights serve as these checkpoints, and it's where the game auto saves, you get your health back, and enemies just kind of fuck off and go away. With the game taking place mostly at night, this also serves as this awesome beacon for players to be able to find their way through the forest to, and able to look for the next light source in order to continue through the level. If these weren't there, these levels are pretty dark, and if you didn't have these kind of shining, glowing beams of light to where you should be kind of heading your way to, it'd be pretty fucking hard to figure out where you're going. This also goes for the final objective as well, as at most times through the level you can kind of see the lit up gas station in the background where you need to be walking to, or the radio tower lights blinking from up above in order to know where you need to go meet the next guy. I absolutely adore games when they find a way to guide the player without specifically telling you where to go, making this weird arbitrary marker on a map or on the HUD to where it says, go here, go here. I'd much rather a game kind of keep that immersion going and naturally guide the player through, which really isn't hard to do, and Alan Wake had really an easy time of doing it, just utilizing light to guide the player to where they need to go. This to me works wonders for the game as well, as you don't spend a lot of time looking at a map, you're just looking around your surroundings and heading to where it seems correct next, and generally there's going to be some sort of guiding beacon to light your way. Being able to see the final destination too kind of lets you kind of gauge where you're at in the level, if you're halfway through, if you're 3/4 of the way through. At the very beginning, everything looks super far off, but as you continue and progress through the level, you can start seeing it getting closer and closer in the darkness. Slowly, as you approach the gas station, the neon lights are filling the glow of your screen, you realize that you've reached a safe haven, and it's a pretty fucking cool feeling if I'm telling you the truth. The other thing I appreciate about Alan Wake is its commitment to the immersion of the game, even including the storytelling. There are cutscenes at the beginning and the end, and sometimes there's like one or two in the middle of the level, but most of the storytelling is actually told in-game as you're walking or standing next to one of the other characters and talking. To me, this really works as, cutscenes are cool, they always look great, but it's fun to not be taken out of the experience for the sake of looking at a pretty cinematic that doesn't look like anything that you're playing in the game. The fact that you're able to incorporate actual like dialogue and narrative storytelling while keeping you in the game, especially in 2010, was really fucking cool at the time, and it still works to me to this day. I still admire the fact that Alan Wake literally keeps his head looking at the other person he's talking to, actually showing them respect. It's something you don't see in a lot of games, and it's that small detail that really makes that work for me. I feel like in this gameplay section, I'm praising a lot of the small things in Alan Wake, but for me, when it comes to game design and game feel, I truly enjoy the feeling that the game is guiding me without outright telling me. Immersion in video games is everything for most people, and Alan Wake goes a long way to not take the player out of that game experience. The loop and combat loop of Alan Wake is pretty simple, but it works well to complement the narrative and its storytelling. There's no bells, there's no whistles, just attention to the world and the story that the writers have decided to put on the table for you. To me, the simplicity actually adds to the narrative itself and doesn't draw any sort of attention away from it, allowing all the focus to be on the game's strength, which is its storytelling. Just a quick side note, the end boss really fucking sucks. Shooting flares in a dark tornado is pretty anticlimactic. It's fine, but as we learn as we go through more and more games, I'm not the biggest fan of the end boss fights anyway, so take that with a grain of salt. I have to say too, when playing on PC, I didn't really run into a lot of technical issues that really stood out. It was a fairly smooth experience from start to finish. All in all, while the gameplay is pretty simple, it does do well to complement the actual story as a whole. I truly find it a fun game to play, even. Maybe not so much from the combat standpoint, but from just looking at the little details that they put into each and every aspect of the world and how you can manipulate into it. Alan Wake, to me, is a truly shining example of game feel and game writing, and despite it being a cult classic, I feel like it should be played by a lot more people, especially before Alan Wake 2 comes out. In conclusion, Alan Wake is a game where the main focus is on the story itself and not necessarily so much the gameplay. And boy is this narrative a ride for sure. While the gameplay really isn't anything to write home about, it serves its purpose to complement and even put a spotlight on the story and the writing and the character development that occurs throughout the game. Alan is a character that's actually pretty well voice acted and mildly believable, with as well as all the supporting characters behind him, giving a good dichotomy, each bringing their own flair to the narrative itself, with Barry as your comedic relief and your cop being, the straight-laced, police officer trying to help Alan along his path to figure out what the hell is happening in Bright Falls. I truly love Alan Wake, and in playing it again 12 years later after release, even today I couldn't help but just continuously play it, staying up till all hours of the night. And the good part about it being 12 years old and me getting a lot older means my brain doesn't work too good. And I honestly couldn't remember half of what happened in Alan Wake, which was truly a treat to be able to experience again for the first time. Alan Wake is definitely, in my opinion, worth the pickup for 20 or 30 bucks. If you like any of the other games Remedy's put out and you skipped over this one for whatever reason, like a lot of people did, do yourself a favor and go ahead and cop it. It's 20 or 30 bucks and it's definitely fucking well worth it. I cannot recommend it enough. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the video. Thank you all so much for checking it out and giving me some of your precious time, as I know that time is such a finite thing in this world. and the fact that you guys have given me any of it at all is much appreciated, to say the least. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that subscribe button to the channel so you see when we post more videos just like this. And go ahead and give that thumbs up button a good smack, and it all helps getting this video out there to more people. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the video or Alan Wake itself, and once again, until next time, my name is Brendan, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.
Memory